Hello and welcome back to Read Becca for my weekly chatty catch up on everything I read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general chit chat. And my co-host Ripley decided to join us today. So I guess I will open with not an apology, but an acknowledgement, I guess, that I've not been a very good BookTube citizen lately. I've been awful at responding to comments. You know, I'm not ignoring you. I kind of am ignoring you, but I'm ignoring you with cause. I am somewhat seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Last weekend was slightly better. This weekend I'm almost feeling like functional again, I guess. So I've had a lot going on and that is starting to subside. So onward, I will hopefully be getting toward watching more videos, being good at commenting and responding to comments that people are giving me, and general engagement will be much less poor. I also have a load of tags backlogged that I need to get to. I know. So anyway, onward to the books. So the first thing I finished this week was The Trumpet of the Swan by E.B. White. I mentioned last week I picked this up because of Dia from Novel Idea, covering it in her favorites for her BookTube birthday videos. And this was delightful. I really enjoyed it. I had not read it before, and I picked up this very lovely classic copy of it with some really beautiful illustrations, and the illustrations are by Edward Francisco, and it is definitely connected, I think, spiritually with Charlotte's Web, because we also have a story similar to that of this child who has a great empathy and connectedness with nature, who discovers an animal, and that animal is kind of extraordinary. So in this case, we have Sam here, who is vacationing, I guess, in Canada with his dad, out in the woods, encounters swans at a lake, and they have just had some babies, and the baby cygnets are unguarded around him because they're in the wilds. And one of them, who doesn't make a sound when he sees him, pulls on his shoelace, and he always remembers that little swan. And that little swan turns out to be named Louis by his family. And so we get both perspectives. We definitely are much more focused on Louis the swan. And Louis is very special and different in that he does not have a voice. So his parents, the swans, the adult swans, talk about him quite a bit, about their concern for him, and they don't foresee him being able to get by without having a voice as a swan. A trumpeter swan needs a voice. And so his dad goes and steals him a trumpet from a music store. And so there are definite elements of anthropomorphization of the animals here, certainly, but it also rings very true to the natural world. And so I definitely preferred the things that ring true to the natural world, but I don't think you could quite have this story without the anthropomorphization either, because he in fact does learn to play the trumpet and get by with that. And we see his life going from this very young swan to an adult swan, and the ways that he gets by and the challenges he faces. He reconnects with Sam, and they encounter each other throughout one another's lives and help one another over the course of their lives. And it just is a great back and forth between them. Louis does become this truly extraordinary individual as a swan performer of it. And I love those aspects. I listened to this on audio along with reading, and E.B. White does read the story and also kind of sings along to many of the things, and that was very enjoyable. And you just totally get the sense of being immersed in nature and the love for nature that E.B. White has throughout this. So I think that was the big strength. Some things were maybe a little dated. I already mentioned I didn't really love the anthropomorphizing of the animals a bit. It's a little much for me. I really did not like the fact that the parent swans are constantly talking about how Louis is defective. And they talk about it in a caring way. It's all to do with like empathy for his plight and how he's going to get by in the swan world without a voice. And that's very integral and important to him having a natural life cycle as a swan. And so I think that was valid conversation. But the fact that they really harp on how defective he is a little much. So I didn't love that. But overall, this was just kind of a joy to read. And it happened to be really perfect timing because I was also reading another book about birds last week for the BookTube Prize. And so having two very bird focused, really about the life cycle of a bird, this definitely is that. It's not like hard science or anything, but it does really get into tackling what the normal life cycle of a bird is. And so it just was great timing, and I enjoyed it very, very much. It was a real delight to read. Then I continued on. So we're all kind of young reading books this week as far as my finishes. I'm reading some other heavy stuff. So for both People-April and Picture This readathons, I picked up Fossil Hunter: How Mary Anning Changed the Science of Prehistoric Life by Cheryl Blackford. This is so great. So I think first off, I discovered a niche in the library that I had not discovered before. I thought I had wandered every inch of the library. I had not. So there was a little tiny corner book nook that has children's biographies that I had not found before. And I discovered them while looking for Picture This books. So that was my prime discovery, I think, out of the Picture This readathon. But this was so great. It was a natural progression, I think, for me to turn to this. I'm always into dinosaurs. Mary Anning is a figure who I don't know enough about, I think, and would like to know more about. So it was very easy to immediately see this and grab it. But also a prime reason for wanting to pick this up is that somewhat recently, within the past probably 6 months or less, I have read The Sixth Extinction, where there is a great deal of conversation about how we discovered what extinction was and fossils. But also I read Our Hideous Progeny. So Sixth Extinction was nonfiction. Our Hideous Progeny is fiction that came out fairly recently and is slightly connected to Frankenstein, but about a woman who is trying to be a naturalist, who is a descendant of Frankenstein, the doctor, not the monster. And so she wants to use Frankenstein's research in order to become a naturalist. And she very much is inspired by Mary Anning. So Mary Anning is a real figure contemporary to her at that time. And this is historical fiction, obviously, so not real at all. But that definitely had Anning in my mind. I don't think in that book she ever actually interacted with Anning in any way, but Anning was this public figure for her at the time. And it just reminded me that that's someone I really need to know more about. And so this was great.
Mary Anning was a naturalist and fossil hunter in the 1800s. The geologists who bought Mary's fossils were eager to make a name for themselves. They wanted to be the first to identify an unknown animal. They gave lectures and published scientific papers about their findings, but they rarely gave Mary the credit she deserved for discovering the fossils that made their work possible. This lack of recognition by men who had far better circumstances in life than she did frustrated Mary. Anna Maria Pinney wrote, "Mary says the world has used her ill. These men of learning have sucked her brains and made a great deal by publishing works of which she furnished the contents, while she derived none of the advantages."
This is so thorough, I think. It gives a true biography from her childhood. Very interestingly, as an infant, she was involved in a lightning strike that killed several people, but she survived. And then her father died in her childhood very tragically. And so a lot of her fossil hunting was actually just to help her family get by. When she was a very young woman, her first discovery was quite young, was before she was an adult. And she discovered this thing, and her mom figured out how they could sell it. And so that is really what spurred her career. And so this had so many great details, even though this is written for children, and it is full of wonderful pictures, both photographs of places, photos of fossils, some drawings and sketches that she did, great letters and notes throughout, and illustrations, lots and lots of wonderful illustrations imagining these creatures alive. It's full of that stuff to keep a child well engaged in this, but it's absolutely chock full of all of the detailed information. And I love that. I love that this is simple to read, but it doesn't degrade the content for a child reader. I would say this is probably closer to a chapter book reading age versus a proper picture book. So it looks like a picture book, but it's probably more of a chapter book. It also is a really great example, I think, to give a child of what they should expect in a nonfiction work. So the back matter is totally packed full of all of the things you really want in a great nonfiction. That you're looking for a timeline of her life, a bibliography, an index, a list of citations for all of the photos, so photo credits, quotation credits. So it's a great example of what you can show a child how to be information literate, I think, in nonfiction. So really enjoyed this. And I think this put me on to wanting to read an adult biography of Mary Anning. Certainly she's such an interesting figure. And I know, just based on looking this one up, that there is one of almost the same name about her, but I have no idea on the quality of it. So if you have a good bio of Mary Anning, please let me know, because I would really be interested in picking one up. And then finally, for finishes, I picked up Outside In, written by Deborah Underwood and illustrated by Cindy Derby. This was kind of an accidental pick. I was looking up something of a similar name that Lindy put me onto, and I saw this and was like, oh, I love that art. I need to go find it. And they had it at my branch at the library, so I went and grabbed a copy. And this was a delight for a children's picture book. This is lovely watercolor, splashy kind of art that I adore. If you've been around, you know, I bought, I think 2 years ago, a bunch of David Mack art, and David Mack does really splashy, like blues and purples in watercolor against a white background, and I adore his style. And this is quite similar, I think, but it's a little more ranging in colors, much more green, as you can see here. And this draws our connection to the outside, how the outside is pulling us to go, and also connects us to the outside even when we're inside. So things like a wooden chair is something that connects you to the outside even if you're inside. Looking through the window is a portal to the outside. And I just love the way this engaged with the topic of being outside or wanting to be outside, and the way we should feel drawn to it. So this just had a really emotional vibe to it. Not like in the sense of making me cry or anything, but it felt a pull on my heartstrings for the love of the outdoors. And I guess connecting back to the other two things that I read this week, I feel like that was a through line in all of these works that I read unintentionally, is that love for the outdoors and for nature and naturalism. So it was a great reading week in children's literature for nature. So yeah, this was a really, really lovely one. I need to go look because actually I did see several other things by Deb Underwood with different illustrators when I was at the library picking that up. So I need to go look and see if I can find some of those other things. So that was my lovely reading week. As I mentioned up front, I only finished some short works for children because I've had some heavier stuff ongoing. And that's because I'm reading Life on Other Planets by Aomawa Shields. And this one is a biography memoir. I'm also reading The City in the Middle of the Night by Charlie Jane Anders, and I made some progress on it, but not too much. And I'm reading one of my BookTube prize books, which is also a nice, heavy, chunky nonfiction book. I think next up, I'm going to be picking up Scribbles, Sorrows, and Russet Leather Boots, The Life of Louisa May Alcott, because it is Alcott April, and this is by Liz Rosenberg. So I think those are what I will be working on this week, hopefully. So that's it for all my books and stuff. This week was a challenge in that I lost power twice this week. So I did watch one thing during that. It was good for reading, not having power, because I only had one thing downloaded, and that was RRR, a Indian film that was nominated for, I think, the Oscar for best, or it won the best song for a movie. And I loved that song, and I downloaded the movie and never watched it. So I had started a while back, a little bit, and didn't get very far because it is a 3-hour movie. So a good one to have for a power outage, right? So that did keep me busy. It is very action-packed, as you kind of expect from Bollywood movies. This one is a Tollywood movie, I guess, not Bollywood. But it's so full of action. It's very violent. It's very over the top, and it is all about colonialism. So this is historical. We've got kind of a rebel who has had a lifelong vendetta against the British, who infiltrated the British police, and as one of them now, but with the goal of secretly, eventually, kind of overthrowing them. And the other guy is a rebel who's not undercover, his sister was kidnapped by the British and taken because they just wanted her, and so they took her. And that was kind of the way things worked for them in their lives, is that the British just were constantly mistreating and taking anything they wanted. And so we have these two guys who wind up unintentionally thrown together, and they're sort of at odds initially and find a way to work together, I guess. But it's full of so many wild scenes. I found it was perfect for the situation I was in because it was really propulsive and easy to watch, full of great music, of course. And like there's one scene where one of them is kind of attacking a party that's being thrown by the British at this big mansion, and he goes in through a truck that is full of wild animals, these cages of like tigers, lions, bears, deer, and the whole thing has a cover on it. And so you can't see him because he's inside as well. But when the cover gets pulled off, all of the animals instantly are able to get out of their cages, and he somehow was under the cover holding 2 flaming torches. Somehow he was in the middle of this thing, surrounded by animals' cages, inside a cage, inside a cover, holding torches, and was fine. It does not make any sense, but it doesn't have to. It's full of very absurd acrobatics as well, that would be unrealistic even for Cirque du Soleil. It's great. It's great. It was a very, very fun, entertaining watch. I think that's all I finished this week for things I was watching. I've got a lot of long-running things that I'm watching, just a small amount of episodes at a time. So I think that's it in I guess the big news. Other than the power outages kind of delayed things, but the home renovation is, for all intents and purposes, done. There are a couple of minor things because of the power outages that they weren't able to get done yet that still they have to come back this coming week, but I have been able to put most everything back, establish a kitchen that's functional again. So things are really looking up. So I think within the next week I will be back full steam ahead, I am hoping, and somewhat normal. So which is not really that normal. I mean, I'm never that normal, but normal for me, whatever that is. I believe that is all I have to catch up with you on this week. I forgot to make any notes of recommendations for this week, so I'll have to catch up on them next week if I have any. Yeah, so I think that is all for me this week. I hope you had a wonderful reading week, and thank you all so much for watching.